everyone. Hope you're having a good day. Today is day 2 of week 3. We're going to continue on in Scripture in the book of Nehemiah, just as Minister Evans wrote yesterday, and what we read in the text. Our subtopic for today is the right time. And we start off with Scripture from Psalm 37, verse 7, which says, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him." Patience is a virtue. We read a lot throughout the Bible concerning the importance of us being patient. I want to read the Scripture text for the day to start with. It's only 3 verses. I want to kick off Nehemiah chapter 2 and read down to verse 3. Again, Nehemiah chapter 2. Scripture says, "In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes," I hope I'm pronouncing that right, "when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king." Remember that Nehemiah is the cupbearer to the king here. "I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, 'Why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick?' This is nothing but sadness of the heart." Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad? When the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire." Very good point by Nehemiah. So, diving into the text, it took 4 months for Nehemiah to begin to see an answer to his prayer about the desperate condition of Jerusalem. God doesn't work on our timetable. So Nehemiah learned to wait just as we must learn to wait. Now, you would think that anyone who dealt with politicians every day, Nehemiah being a top-level advisor to the king, would be used to bureaucratic delays and government red tape. But waiting on God to move is a whole different matter than waiting on someone downtown or in Washington to push papers along. We saw yesterday that the transformation of society is a spiritual issue, which means nothing will really happen until God shows up. Spiritual issues typically take time. Something I want to add in there. God is worth the wait because when He shows up, He shakes things up. Being sad in the king's presence could have cost Nehemiah his life because it was against Persian law. Nehemiah's job was to cheer the king up, period. No questions asked. But God gave him favor with the king and just the right words to say. Let me show you what I mean. Notice that in verse 3 there, Nehemiah did not mention Jerusalem by name, even though Jerusalem was the place that needed rebuilding. He just talked about the home of his ancestors. A little bit of the Bible history will tell you what's going on here. Back in Ezra, chapter 4:21, verse 21, Artaxerxes had ordered a halt to the rebuilding of Jerusalem. He had allowed it, but he got word that if Jerusalem were rebuilt, it would pose a threat to the stability of the Persian Empire because the people would stop paying taxes. So Artaxerxes became concerned in order the rebuilding to stop, which was accomplished by the use of force. Nehemiah knew his history. He understood the politics involved. So he just talked about the plight of his people. But Artaxerxes was no dummy. He knew what city his cupbearer was talking about, but God knew the right time for Nehemiah to bring up the subject. 4 months earlier, the king might have had him killed. Are you waiting for the next election to change things? Waiting on God will be a whole lot more fruitful. And I really like Mr. Evans bringing up about the next election, because I no doubt in my mind, I feel like the Christian community has put so much stock into politicians to change and reform. And for example, we brought up the abortion issue, and the whole conservative putting the stock in the conservative politicians to get abortion overchanged. And here we are, we've had plenty of opportunities where a conservative's been president. We've had a conservative House and Senate, or at least a good majority. We've had enough, I'll say, pawns and figures in place to where that could have happened politically, but it hasn't. Why? Because the spiritual issue still had never been addressed. And I see so much of that same kind of attitude or way of thinking, that let's push this and push that to try to get things changed and try to reform, as we're talking about here. When truth of the matter is we need to get down on our knees, and we need to be praying wholeheartedly. We need a revival of righteousness and holiness in this country. We need to begin taking prayer more seriously. As you see here, this started with a prayer, and one thing I have shown you time and time again is how often we read in the Bible and a movement of God took place as a consequence of prayer. Prayer caused it, and you can read throughout church history and see the same thing. In the Think About It section, Mr. Evans writes, "Let God do things in His timing, and His plan will unveil itself. In the meantime, rest and wait, and keep praying." And I'm going to end it on that note. Y'all have a good day. God bless you.